Welcome to 2020, y'all.
Happy New Year.
So, announcements and highlights. I think it's news maybe since the last meeting is that Teddy is expecting a child and will very soon vanish from our midst for a little while. He'll be back eventually. I wish him great luck and happiness and all that. Practically speaking, for us, this may impact our ability to sign and release packages. It'll be great.
He did give us access to the keys, though, right, Seth? I thought he somehow transitioned that to someone.
Well, yes and no.
Right.
He signs the Mac packages with his personal Facebook key.
Yeah, and we don't have. Okay, so Ted is unavailable for all intent and purposes. If there is a need, like we absolutely have to get something signed and pushed, he's available for that kind of stuff. But having gone through parental leave myself, I would really love it if we can avoid bothering him. But I think we'll be okay, right? Like I think the release that we've got is pretty solid. Like I think we'll be all right.
I think so too. I have been through parental leave, and conversely, I would absolutely have taken some time to go work on a side project.
Well, I mean, Ted has plenty of side projects that I would love for him to focus on.
Ted can show up if he wants to show up. We have no... I think probably one thing that we should do... Is Ted still around, or has he hit leave yet?
He's still around, but we're in performance calibration.
That's
so
right.
He's off the grid, man, hard. Like, he's going to be really tough to get time from.
So I think one thing that we probably do need to do is I don't think we've promoted the current release to stable in the packaging.
I can do that. Yeah.
This is like
something we are ready to do.
We can talk about it. You can do that in the RPM repos and the deb repos?
Oh, no, but that's fast. You can do that.
Okay. That's probably a thing that we should do.
If we are... if we decide we're good to go on that, I can take it as an action item today to ping him and have that toggled, because I think that's super quick. And I think the intent was that before he gets too bogged down with stuff and disappears, we would have a tagged stable release for, what is it, 4.1.2?
I think 4.1.2, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about that. I think it's probably stable. It's like a really small update from 4.1.1. Anyone heard otherwise on that?
I haven't had any negative experiences with it. Like I say, I run it at home, but I haven't heard anything bad about it. Not in Slack chatter.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't seen anything. The reality is we'll push it live and then someone will say something, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
I was just double checking that I've actually pushed it out to some of our test hosts. I've got 4.1.2 running on a handful of Mac, Linux, and Windows machines, and it seems fine in our test environment too.
Nice.
Yeah, so if we do decide we need to cut a new release, we can kind of work through that, and worst case, we'll sign up with a different key. I don't know if that'll be a problem. Like, either there might be someone else in Facebook, or I can sign up with Collide keys. Like, we can figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm a little more worried about some of the, I think some of the process is still a little bit Teddy-driven as opposed to CI-driven, but that's the ongoing project.
Yeah, it's hard, right? So we'll get there. It's just got to keep pushing.
Yep. I know. It's super exciting for Teddy, so I don't want to get too caught up into how will we survive? We'll be fine. I hope he gets enough sleep to be fine too. And it'll be great.
What was next on the agenda?
Sorry, I'm just taking a note on this to-do item. Is push 4.1.2 to stable in the Linux repos.
Yeah, well, and just everywhere too, right? It's still not tagged on the GitHub.
Yeah, that's just a checky box. I can tag
for
GitHub.
sure. Yeah. Well, we should. Shit,
might be
I
tagged.
don't even think I uploaded it to Chocolatey either. Chocolatey was down when I tried to upload
Oh,
412 last. So
Yeah. You'll upload
I'll
it?
take it also as an action item to myself. I'll make sure that it's on. I have the package built and signed.
Cool. That'd be awesome.
I can do that today. Yeah.
I can toggle GitHub. That's no big deal. So next up on our agenda item is PRs for discussion, and I see a couple of suggested discussion items.
Yeah, I put both of those on there to monopolize time. The first one on there is a PR that actually a TrelloBits intern worked on. Introduces a new table that piggybacks on some of the current Chrome stuff that essentially provides rows for every pair of, I believe, URL pattern and let me see what the actual. Every script and URL pattern exposed in each for each extension ID for every Chrome install on the host system. The idea being that you would join that to the actual Chrome extension table to get a more meaningful query.
I don't know much about any of this code, so I don't know that I've got much to say.
I did a bit of cleanup on it, but I would just appreciate any sort of eyes on it to see if I made any really egregious C++ mistakes. My C++ isn't always the best, so would appreciate it.
As a maybe naive question, is it possible to make this in a way that doesn't require joining, or is it like inherently?
It's unrolling a set of nested lists. So unless we want to encourage like duplicated rows for a lot of things, or it probably works best with a join.
Okay, I guess maybe hopefully some people could look at it. Similarly, it looks like you stuck 6153 up.
Yep. Yeah, and that one is just sort of a refinement PR for some of the string expansion behavior on some of the Windows tables. A lot of the Windows tables pull from registry keys or registry values, and those values in turn have literal environment strings in them, which Windows provides a set of routines for expanding. So I exposed some new utility functions for calling those Win32 routines, as well as added actual expansions for some of the tables.
It seems super useful. I know we keep running into places where we need a little bit. I know Nick was also working on some things like that. So
we had experienced it. I don't think I have anything in the actual works for it though.
No, I don't know about this one. You were working on like expansion routines for the date conversions.
Oh, dude, yeah. Sorry, I still have that up, and I still need to get it shipped. The problem we hit. Oh, actually, I thought that did ship. The problem we hit with that was getting it working with Buck, and then having unit test support in Buck and CMake for that explicit thing. And inside of Buck, we hit this long trail of header imports that was just this like rat's nest. That was why we haven't landed it yet. So like I could ship it now, it just wouldn't have tests in Buck, which would be unfortunate.
Does it have them in CMake?
It had them in CMake, and they're working, like everything is working fine in CMake. It was just the way that the libraries are structured in Buck, but so it wasn't. Sorry, go ahead.
So Teddy was working on fixing that structural issue. And I don't think he finished or shipped it, but I might be wrong.
No, I don't think he has yet, because this is going to be a pretty large change. Like we need to restructure how Buck is doing the library organization, and that's no small feat.
So while I'm loath to not have tests in Buck, like, does it make sense for us to just accept that they're going to have to converge?
I think, I can file it as a follow-up issue and bring it in later. I think it's okay for them to be a little divergent because there are other tests on the same library. It's just different functionality. I mean,
but the tests are also in CMake, so they're always
because of a specific game.
Sorry.
No, sure, they're still going to run. What I mean to say is, like, it's not like we don't have coverage in Buck. Like, they're divergent, sure, but we still have some coverage. It's just not as thorough. So, like, I'll take it as this will be another follow-up for me that I'll just restructure that diff so we can get it shipped, because I'd like to see that landed. It'd be pretty useful.
Yeah, I just always worry too when things like go on forever.
Yeah, for real, it's kind of frustrating. And I can take a look at those two PRs, Woodruff, and give you a quick review because I'm familiar with the at least the browser extension table.
Mhm.
And yeah, the environment expansion utilities on Windows should be pretty straightforward. So I can get you a review for those soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'm just taking
About Bach, I had a question. It seems like there is a very specific way in Bach to import libraries to allow for reproducible builds. I was wondering if Facebook has any, even if it is not related to osquery, if it has a project that makes use of this feature, so we can have a look at that code, maybe see if we can make a little more friendly toward this kind of library usage.
Maybe I can try and take a look around. There's a lot of projects internally that use Buck a lot better than we do. I know for sure. There's a lot of people like associated with Oculus that use Buck with Windows native code, but like they're pretty disjointed from me and what I do. So like I've never really looked through that code base. I can try and take a look though and see, but if Teddy's already kind of like working his way through restructuring things, he might have already done this.
I see. Just wondering, how does the libraries get imported inside Bach? Are you using binaries, or is it something similar to what we have right now, building from source?
I don't know, man. I think it's similar to building from source. I know it is because we're not hosting third-party libraries anywhere. So like if I pull down a clean OS query and I Buck build it, it works. Like it doesn't have to go out and fetch any third-party libraries that are pre-built.
Anyone want to chat any more about the Buck thing? I can try and look up where those PRs were. I know we talked about them in past office meetings, at least they're linked into the minutes. So one of the conversations that we've been really slowly having in a PR, this is PR 5882, which was a PR from Upticks about fixing the flag and CLI flag behavior. It basically sounds like, I haven't confirmed this, but according to this PR, we are not correctly enforcing the CLI flag semantics. So anything that's supposed to only be settable in the CLI is actually settable in a config file, which sort of raises this other interesting question of why do we even have the difference? I've sort of heard two ideas, and one of them is correct, and one of them could be correct. The things I've heard are right. We might require something be a CLI flag and not a config flag because it's required to bootstrap configs. And the other one is that if you had privacy or performance concerns, you might want to actually require the endpoint enable a feature specifically without it kind of bouncing through the config file. In this PR, Teddy said that the original intent was to configure something was bootstrap related, like why let you have the config file set a new config server? So personally, if I think about that, that doesn't make sense to me because you might sort of bootstrap one config and then the server might say, hey, now go talk somewhere else. Like there's a really interesting workflow there that doesn't matter to me, but at least a couple of people have said they need some of that. And it's more interesting to me to sort of reason through, like, I don't know, should a server be able to enable the carver, or does that require like an endpoint have a fairly strong toggle on off for that? So I kind of wanted, like, what do people think? Does it make sense to have CLI only flags?
I think it does. For example, you just mentioned.
Well, which one? For things like the carver?
Yeah. it may have serious privacy implication to enable it without the user knowing. But then again, we also have other tables that may cause this kind of issue. So I don't know. Still, I'm in favor of things like a carver, keep it in a CLI flag. Sounds like a good idea.
So I've always felt like this kind of falls in. This is like super subjective to your use cases and your infrastructure setup for osquery. Like I think we should have the flexibility to have both options, because like I'll use as an example signed queries. We I think Mitchell a long time ago wrote an implementation to have queries signed and verifiable by the client. It was like, well, why would you ever want that? Like if you're in a situation where you can't trust your server infrastructure, you're in a really bad spot. But then we've gone the opposite direction of saying like, well, why do we need to have signed verification of query results on the endpoint? It's like, well, if you're in a situation where you can't trust your endpoints, you're in a bad spot. It's like, okay, well, based off of you and your company and your enterprise and how you're deploying osquery, one of these two things might make more sense for you, right? Like maybe your server setup is really shit, but your endpoint game is super strong. So like maybe you want to make sure that you can configure your like, or maybe your company is very privacy free, right? Like, and you're very transparent with your employees. So the fact that you're having the carver enabled, you want it to be in the flags file. So that way everybody can see exactly what you're doing with osquery at all times. That's just my 2 cents on it. Like, I don't think we should be in the business of saying like how you should use osquery from an operational security perspective. I think it makes sense to kind of offer up both options, but I do strongly feel like we should come to terms with consistency on that, because that has always been really goofy to me that like we have 2 different macros and neither of them seem to do anything different from the other. Like, so I don't know the original use cases, but I've never seen them.
I half agree. And I agree that a lot of this seems to come down to like, what is your particular deployment and what are the choices that you as a site make? But we as osquery have to decide, is carver a CLI only flag or is it a flag? And even if we support both, like we have to decide for every one of these flags, which one are they?
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying like, I mean, I could see equal arguments for either or. Like being in a situation of saying, well, the carver should only operate in these types of modes. I'm like, well, I mean, I think that we can have healthy discussions around these. What I'm going towards is I think it makes sense to have the opportunity of both, as opposed to merging them all and saying we just have a flag, just a concept of a flag, and it doesn't matter how you pass it. I'm saying I think it makes sense to have the concept of something that could be a flag in the config file versus a flag that's only specifiable via the CLI. Like I think that makes sense to me.
So if that makes sense, are there any flags that we think should be CLI only?
Shell.
What shell?
osquery d.exe -S or -- shell. That's one that like, why the hell would you ever put that? Yeah, like I do think that they're like, that's one.
Well, it's not a flag though. That's like a fundamental mode change.
Yeah, it's still treated. I think it's still treated as a flag. Like it's still read in. I don't have to go and look.
I don't know. I mean, like check config also, right?
Check config, absolutely. Or like anything to do with debugging. So dumping the database. Dumping the database is something that I've used quite a bit, but that's something like, why would you ever have that in your flag file? Pretty much just anything. To me, like it makes sense for anything debugging, verbosity, debugging, pretty modes, how you're putting your output, all of that stuff. Like make that CLI only.
Yeah, I mean, are you advocating that basically we take all of the enable, disable functionality, the carver, et cetera, and shove it into the flag? And, basically, well, one, I think we should fix flag and CLI flag. Like if there's a bug, and we should fix it. And then we should maybe call almost everything a flag and be done with it.
It might be a good starting point. Start with everything as a flag. And then we could have a RFC about what things should be CLI flags. That might be a way to approach it, at least.
I was wondering, it seems like, but someone has to confirm that any extension can update the config, even though it may not be a TLS distributed plugin. And so this is why I was thinking we had this kind of separation, so we don't have a rogue extension. Not necessarily rogue, but maybe not configured correctly, or doing something that is not expected in a new version, maybe.
Isn't config extensions a specific extension type?
Yeah.
I mean, so like fundamentally, this goes down to the same question of like, do you trust your extensions in sight? If not, maybe don't run them.
Oh yeah,
but if you have auto-loadable extensions,
I was thinking about extensions that are not config.
Yeah, like if you had just auto-load any extension in this directory, and we were in a state where there's a bug that non-config extensions can modify the config. I see what you're saying, Alessandro. Like that makes sense.
So I think I did this by mistake, updating the configuration without having a config plugin, and it seemed to be working fine.
Could we verify whether or not that's a problem and cut an issue for it? Like if that is a problem, that seems pretty serious to me.
Well, I don't think there are permissions on the registry messages. I mean, I didn't see them. I don't know if the registry is capable of rejecting a request for a request that is not supposed to come from that specific extension type. But yeah, I mean, your logic still applies. You would have to naturally trust everything you put both on the endpoint and the server. I mean, you really cannot connect to the extension socket without admin privileges. And being able to change the auto-load file would be a bug, which can be easily fixed. So yeah, it was just a thought.
Well, it's a fair thought. I mean, there's all of these cases where, you know, you can go and break things, and like you can compromise your endpoints, and like osquery is fundamentally a very powerful piece of software running as root on your endpoints. So it's this hard question of like, what should we do? And I'm kind of loath, like I don't want to build infrastructure to let a site set whether or not something, like to keep using the carver as an example, right? I don't want to say the carver is a CLI only flag unless you pass the allow carver in config option. Like there's too many config.
Yeah, that is true.
So I kind of just, like, I think we should just decide for kind of each flag, what should we go, and be willing to like adjust them as we hear. And I'm pretty willing to go in any direction on it.
Yeah, I don't know. Although I seem to recall some people hating the CURL table quite a lot, to the point that they wanted to disable this for good with no way of turning this back on. Unless the configuration was updated, of course.
You've got disabled tables.
Yeah, true.
So if I'm going to ask, like, do people want to just push everything into flags, or do people want to like actually reason through, and I don't mean in this meeting, more like in a PR or something, reason through like individual flags? Like, you know, show of hands, like who wants to just push everything into flags?
I don't know how to answer right now, but I think it is a good idea to think about it.
Okay, so, well, we can maybe keep this conversation in 5.8.2. The thing I think I'm writing into our minutes here is like, it seems like there's consensus to keep both options, but much less consensus about whether anything is CLI flag only.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a user, it would be less confusing to have both options work both ways.
I think as a user, it's fine as long as there's a clear story to tell about it. Okay, well, sounds like nothing else on that one right now. We got a sort of proposal and maybe 50% of a PR, 6150, to create a enable function, enable tables option. This is sort of the counterpart to disable tables. thought I'd bubble it up into a meeting as like a pretty notable change. So I feel like those should go through a conversation.
I didn't see that. What's the use case compared to the disabled tables?
The use case, so I'm not the originator of this, but my impression from this conversation is they are dealing with an external vendor, perhaps my employer, not wholly clear to me, and they would like to dramatically limit what their osquery server can read off of their endpoint. So they kind of want to treat it as a whitelist instead of a blacklist.
Oh, I see.
Hi, I'm the original author behind.
Welcome.
Hi, Ron. I'm the original author behind the enable tables functionality, and I think you worded it really well. From my point of view, my employer is in the process of deploying osquery on every laptops. And I want to have the possibility to limit what osquery sees of my systems from now. So this is doable with disabled tables. But since osquery will ship new tables in the future, and I think as a user, I don't have time to review each of these tables now and in the future. I want to limit them now, fire it and forget it, and let osquery run forever. And I hope I made myself clear.
Yeah, I think I understand. But I mean, it isn't really hard to pull down the table list.
The full list is something like 100 right now. So maybe in the future it's going to be much more.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to create the functionality. Like if we have effectively blacklist functionality in the tables, we may as well put whitelist functionality. It seems fine. I mean, I think, I'm kind of in a weird place for this conversation, but feature seems okay. It's a little bit interesting given our prior conversation too. Like it's worth noting that osquery doesn't provide strong guarantees about data accessibility. So that's kind of always worth noting, but I don't know if we support disabled tables, we may as well support enabled tables. Like some level that feels fine to me.
Which one of the two settings takes precedence when both are specified?
Great question.
Is it possible to only have one table list flag value and then have another flag that specifies whether it is a blacklist or a whitelist?
I think that's more confusing.
I think that when, as a user, you specify at least one enable table, it doesn't really make sense to disable any more table as you just tell osquery to enable just one table. So in which use case would you use both flags?
Well, there may be issues with specific tables. For example, you may be running on another Windows version that may cause issues when, for example, querying the Intel management interface table, and you may want to disable it. So I'm not sure how many people use this for privacy purposes, but I can see the blacklist being used for stability, or maybe disabling tables that may cause issues on this particular environment where osquery is running on.
So if you say it that way, I mean, I feel like the blacklist takes precedence, right? If you have a sort of like the whitelist defaults to star and the blacklist defaults to nil, and if you whitelist tables A, B, and C, and then you blacklist tables B, then ultimately you get tables A and C.
Yeah, makes sense.
The one comment I had on the PR, which probably left there, is that it feels like this doesn't need another SQLite DB manager call. This should kind of just, there's one SQLite DB manager call that should just gain the appropriate logic to
Yes,
answer.
I will do the appropriate pitches.
And anyone want to argue against this? Like, this seems fine to me. So,
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable use case.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. And I would plus one the notion of having the two things separate instead of combining them, having a whitelist and a blacklist. The one thing I'd ask for this would be some documentation, if you don't mind. Like, could you kind of like, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be worth adding this to the site. I only took a quick cursory glance at your PRs, but I didn't notice any.
it should have
like
they should show up
yeah,
with the rest of the command line arguments.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of thing though, it seems like it might merit a section in the read the docs about whitelisting and blacklisting of tables and like calling it out specifically, because this would be kind of a neat feature, I think.
I'm okay with this. To be honest, this sort of points at some other pending work I had from a while ago. I sort of went on a lark of trying to figure out if I could disable all the internal tables and discovered I couldn't.
All right.
Because it's basically, they all run in like the global init state. So it's very weird. So I feel like there's like some other set of functionality that I want about like deregistering things so that like an extension can then re-register with the same names. But I don't know what it would mean yet. So like I've kind of ignored it. But like the use case I was thinking of, which would be, I think, really interesting to sort of us as a core team of people, is I was trying to find ways of testing joins and things. So I wanted to basically say, okay, you don't have a process table because you're running in CI, but here's the data that you would get if you queried it. So I can implement that in an extension. I can basically just say like, here's the data that goes with every one of these tables. Like go nuts, see what you get. But I can't get them registered. So.
Yeah, I don't think it was easy to unregister the tables until recently with SQLite 3 something. So we could maybe look into it now. Though some tables cannot be disabled. For example, the processes table is used by the init to check which child process it should focus on when doing the watcher thing. I'm not sure there is an error message if we disable this. Maybe osquery just explodes.
I mean, you break it, you bought it. Okay, so I mean, it sounds like there's general support for this, and then like any other feature in PR, we should just kind of work through it and get the functionality to be what we like, and write some test cases, and TBD in the PR.
Oh, I noticed that you didn't sign the CLA. Was it not working, or you still have to sign it? Because sometimes we have some issues. So if you
I just didn't look at it at all. But yes, since we discussed of the functionality, I will sign the SLA. But I have troubles with the Windows build, but I think it's not the right time to discuss about it now. I will just put messages on the pull request.
Okay. We also had some issues with the CI, so we may just try to restart it if it is caused by something else than the code.
Right.
Okay, seems like we all got quiet and I finished taking some notes. Upgrading the OpenSSL version?
Yeah, the version we have, which, if I remember correctly, is 102T, maybe Stefano remembers the exact one. It is in end of life as of this year, rather the 31 of December. So we were blocked to upgrade it because we were still using the pre-built binaries from the S3 bucket of Facebook. So once we port everything to source, we can finally update it. And I'm not aware if there is any CVE on it, but we should try to tag this for the next release.
Do you know what's left?
No. Stefano, do you remember?
How can I tell?
I think. How can I say it? You have to cross-reference. You have to see what files are already, what CMake files are already inside the library's CMake source migration folder modules. So it's not immediate. You have to look at the main CMake list and see the list with all the libraries Windows requires. There's each library is marked as required to be on a Windows. And then you have to take that list and match it with the list of files inside the library's CMake source migration modules and see what's missing. But in short, I checked last time. Sorry?
You said Windows.
I said Windows because I think it's Windows that's the only one that's I don't recall now. I think Windows has a couple of libraries, I recall. I said Windows because I checked Windows last time. I don't recall if macOS is done. So, yeah. In any case, let me... I put something in the chat. So that file on the root, there's a CMake, the CMake file. There's this variable library descriptor list. There are all the libraries, third-party libraries we need. For each library, it's specified on which platform we need it. So you need to take that list for the platform you are interested in. And then you have to match them with the files again inside libraries, CMakes, source migration, and modules. The find something.cmakes that are missing are the libraries that need to be ported. And I think again there was libarchive, I think, for Windows, and yeah, I think maybe only one actually, libarchive. macOS, I didn't check. But there's also the question with, I think this Teddy mentioned last time, I think between OpenSSL 1.0.2 and 1.1.0 or 1.1.1 changed something in the compatibility in the APIs. So we might have also to update third-party libraries. I mean, we have to see, and maybe on those third-party libraries, some API will changes. So yeah, I hope it is straightforward to update it, but we might encounter some issues.
Yeah, I was hoping we would have luck with if-def statements inside the code. At least for the libraries. I'm not sure about osquery.
maybe another thing we could do is just change the bucket URL and see what breaks during a build.
Oh yeah, but we can also just remove the Facebook layer from the settings and see if it still builds.
Yeah, it feels like that's a thing we should, I don't know, maybe just get on top of.
So, yeah, I'm checking the list right now. So Windows, I think it's libarchive and line noise ng, which is missing, those two. For macOS is OGS, I see. POPT, so that's two.
OGS is fun to build.
LLPD, SlutKit, SmartMon tools. So yeah, there are some for macOS. SSD CPP. Yeah, macOS is the one that's most behind.
It's also the one that has the most stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Should we make an issue for this? Do people just kind of want to try and make forward progress? Does someone want to own this?
Yeah, it would be nice to make a list in an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm wondering, like, maybe, I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if the right way to do this is to like make a list and have people try and like bring things into the source layer one by one, or just have someone be like, I'm going to take the Facebook layer off and see what breaks in the build.
Either method is fine, I think, but it is nice to have an issue so we can track it in the next milestone.
Okay.
Yeah, I can make a list. I can open one or two issues, maybe one for macOS and one for Windows, with the list of missing libraries. So we can keep track of them.
Okay, feel free to throw it in the current milestone. I feel like there aren't a lot of us that have figured out how to add things to the source layer. Like it might be Stefano and Zach and maybe Alessandro.
Yeah, it usually requires some experimentation since those libraries are using auto tools or something like that, and they always end up having weird compilation phases where they generate stuff and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Does this dovetail interestingly with your work around was it stuff for Arch Linux?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, speaking about Arch Linux, the biggest issue there is that we are not allowed to use libc++ because it is not present the way we need it inside the repository. And we also need a new layer to pull in the dependencies from the system. So that is why right now it is a little messy to build it, but we had Anatol work on it with some help from Teddy. So yeah, there are some things interesting to merge, like a couple of fixes I made on CMake.
I mean, anything that's mergeable should get merged. Someone added something about catching build libraries, especially on Windows?
Yeah, I did.
Caching.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have to find a way to solve this issue, because otherwise Windows developers will never have much fun building osquery. I mostly use Linux, and I didn't notice how bad it was, the build time on Windows, until very recently when I tried again.
It's pretty bad right now.
Especially if you forget to define the version to a fixed value, which happens to me sometimes, and you just commit something or change a file and you have to rebuild everything.
So I feel like there's kind of two ways I see this could go. One of them is to set up set up an artifact store equivalent to S3, where we keep build artifacts, and then like you could build them all from source, or you could build them off of the osquery artifact layer. And I imagine most Windows people wouldn't build from source most of the time. Probably no one would build from source most of the time, but it would be there. And the other way is to figure out whether or not any of the CC cache equivalents for Windows are worth looking at, or if they're all trash.
Stefano has had quite some fun with this, and maybe you can talk about it.
Well, the thing is that anything that probably works, it has to be paid. Like probably Incredibuild has something like this. I tried what's FL cache? I mean the Python script one, and also tried the one that Mozilla uses for Firefox, which is SCC cache, but it does have issues because they state they only test it against their own build, so you should not expect it to work for anything else. So yeah, and there's not much else because the build system on Windows are a bit nasty. So so yeah, I think the only the solution here is choosing. So right now, when we build the libraries, the layout we create in the build folder is not the same layout of actually taking that library, compiling it, and installing it. But so if we choose a layout to install them, a specific layout to install them, then yeah, we can add that layer on CMake, and CMake can through its find package or find library functions find that build library, so that any developer can build once those libraries from source, and then he can just keep a local artifact, and which he can point CMake to. This is also a common solution, I know. Because part of the problem is also where if we want to, osquery want to provide those previous libraries, where we keep them. That question is still open. So probably keeping a local or developer shared artifact might be the solution.
So it sounds like one thing we could do is change the way we treat them in the build folder, so that you could point at a existing standalone library, makes it easier to stick it into the CMake dependencies layer. That sounds a lot like it dovetails with the Arch work to me. But I don't know if like Windows is fundamentally different than Linux in the way we structure the build folder. This is all kind of beyond my depth.
Well, it should be the same, the structure of the directory. I mean, we should try to have it work the same.
I mean, the thing is, do we think that because we could say you can just zip, since all the libraries artifacts are actually below a specific hierarchy of directories, you can say, can we right now say we zip that folder? You can zip that folder and move it and zip it somewhere else and point CMake to it. That's the idea. I think that's not partially possible because we still, most of the headers we require are in the source folder actually. So we need a CMake command, a CMake target, something to prepare the correct layout for that kind of exporting that library to a zip folder.
So how hard would it be to restructure the way they get built to better support that?
I mean, I don't think it's hard. We know CMake knows which files, which header are required, at least the folders that each library needs. So yeah, we can just copy them.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like the thing you're saying is that for caching build libraries, we have to restructure the way we do it so people can point to that existing install, or we can use our source layer. That feels like the simplest path. But I don't know. I think Stefano and Alessandro, you two probably wrote most of the current build systems. So
yeah. I don't foresee any. I mean, again, it's just a matter of adding a similar way actually to what we already have with the pre-built libraries on Facebook. Simply, the layout of the library will be a bit different, so we have to instruct CMake where is what, and what is where, and yeah, beyond that, it shouldn't be much difficult. It's just that the source layer expects a different layout. Some files to be in the source folder, some files to be in the build folder, and it expects to build. So, yeah.
can we change that so it expects everything in the same place?
Sorry?
Can we change that so that it expects everything in the same place?
So yeah, copying everything. I mean, yeah, it might work. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking if we are getting something out of it, but yeah. Probably we can insert a logic switch inside the code we already have.
I'm just thinking about like how to make it easy to handle pre-built things and let people point at things, right? Because I mean, theoretically, to use a library, you have to have its headers and the shared libraries to link again. So like, what does it matter where they are as long as all your paths are there?
Hey, Alessandro, can you mute your mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking to
Also,
Mike.
sorry, guys. I have to duck off. Thank you very much for the time. Sorry to bail on a really good discussion. But
Nice to see you, Nick.
next time.
Yeah.
Yep. See ya.
But no, yeah, it's not a matter of where they are, but yeah, currently since we have that split where some files are there and some other files are somewhere else, yeah, we cannot use CMake, find library, or find package, or even write some because they are all the header files are all over the place. So yeah, if they are united into a single folder with a specific layout, we can say that's the layout we want to for the libraries, and that's the layout we will use if you want to build with pre-built or if you want to build from source. So yeah, that's basically the work we have to do.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. Are you suggesting that if we build from pre-build, we would copy the headers into a shared location?
Yeah.
Is that that feels weird to me, but I don't spend a lot of time in big C++ projects. Like, why not just set the header path to include, wherever they are?
Because, yeah, I see. Yeah, no, I mean, the problem with that is that you have, if you want to have the user point CMake to a folder and say, please look there to find the libraries and headers for that library, you have to have them all together. You cannot specify single headers and say that specific header for that library is in that folder, that other specific header. I mean, you can, but you will have to have a huge...
I guess I was imagining it differently, and this is really actually a good conversation, because I don't know, I don't maintain large C++ projects, right? Is that I'd sort of imagine, I think there's value in being able to treat each of these independently, and to achieve that, I imagine something where you might say, this library, take this zip, it comes from this zip file, right? You don't zip this file into some known location or some given location, and CMake would basically say, oh, to get libagius, here's its header, here's its thing. And each of these can live in its own place, because I don't ever think I'm not sure there's ever a point to saying, oh, look for everything in this one location, other than maybe system libraries. I don't know that I ever want to say, here's an entire stack of 100 dependencies in one directory versus, it's the CMake thing you pointed at earlier, right? Where, where's that line 89?
Mm-hmm.
Right, or not there. It's wherever we define what the layers are, right? I could imagine saying, oh, I need to look for OpenSSL. Well, is there a zip file for OpenSSL? If so, I'll unzip it into an OpenSSL directory and set the paths for that.
So, okay, I see. Let me understand if I understood it right. Let me ask if I understood it right. You said basically how it is with configure scripts, where you can specify for each library its folder. So you say OpenSSL folder is there, libxml folder is somewhere else, etc. Okay, if that's okay. Yeah, this is not present currently because we use a common root folder for all the libraries and say from here and down you will find all the libraries. Yeah, we can change CMake to actually generate an option for each library, third-party library we have, so that you can specify them and say, okay, OpenSSL is here, libxml is there, etc.
I don't. Does it even make sense?
Yeah, in fact, I was asking, it does make sense. I mean, does it make sense? Because if the objective here, again, it's caching and speeding up builds, the workflow, I imagine, again, it's you download osquery, you build once everything from source, and you have all those libraries compiled all together, all coming from osquery, from that build you've done, and you will just take them out of the build folder so that you will not delete them by error, etc. If you have to do a clean build.
I mean, to be honest, I think that workflow is going to push away developers, right? Because imagine someone who's maybe a Windows developer, but not a really intense osquery developer who has a couple of one-line fixes into osquery and they want to test it, or maybe wants to mock out a new table. I don't think they want to build the entire source tree, right? They would be much happier if they could just basically pull from a precompiled list, right? Like the Facebook S3 bucket or, an osquery S3 bucket. So like what would it take for us to enable that?
I mean, I think that we have to have a place to store them. I was considering it just because we don't have a place to store them. That's the main issue, really, because
I will make you a GCS bucket.
Okay.
If that's what's stopping us, we can do that.
Mainly, yes, bandwidth and space. Not really, but something that can support the bandwidth we possibly need.
I mean, we can, like, I don't know what bandwidth we need, so I don't know. But like, I feel like we can work through that. Like, we've got options.
Because that layer we already have. Obviously, we again expect the libraries we download from the Facebook layer to have each one to have a specific layout. But yeah, that can be adjusted. It's not too.
That would be true for us too. Like, I could absolutely. That would be true for us too. I think. I think I'm proposing that we figure out how to create an osquery binary layer, analogous to the Facebook layer, because I think it will help developers everywhere.
Yeah, we basically already have it. We just have to like kind of copy it, change the URL. Actually, we already can change the URL from where those zip are downloaded. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It feels like we have many of the pieces, but we haven't kind of put them together yet. And like, similarly, I think it's good and important for us to build from source stuff, and because like I think we need that too. So it's sort of funny.
Yep.
So if you're mostly just blocked on like the technical, where do we host this much data? How do we serve this much data? I can take that as a to-do. I can't so much help with like the human bandwidth of how do I configure and build something. But figuring out how to serve files is that's a thing I do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have anything else on this build library issue? And I think this item about BPF is probably from Alessandro, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So I was wondering how many people are using the BPF things we have currently in osquery. They are mainly there to track the set UID and kill system calls. So I would like to start small and implement those using my new library for tracing system calls, and eventually end up with more featureful tables, such as socket events and so on. But yeah, start small because eventually I know I will have to change this or that to make it more compatible with osquery, and I would like to start small for this reason. And so it seems like they're depending on some of the EV2 framework, I'm not sure. That is unfinished, apparently. So
I believe the EV2 framework is dead.
Yeah, for now. I mean, we still have the pull request open. I'm not sure if who was working on it. If we can ping them again.
I believe this came up in an office hours, and I think Facebook is not currently working on that.
Oh, I see.
I might be wrong. Like, Teddy or Thor might remember, but I think My recollection is dead and gone.
So the question then is, where would you store those two system call events?
I maybe have a different question. So in the distant past, talking about BPF stuff, what is our goal? Is our goal to use it as a processing framework to replace audit D? Is our goal to expose it to sites via something like the ATC configuration? Like, would we let people basically create tables via BPF things at runtime? Kind of like, what's our intent with BPF?
Yeah, so I think that your suggestion to go the ATC way is really cool. And it is what I would like to eventually end up with. It would be also nice to somehow implement the audit tables we have with the BPF, mainly because audit is really heavy on the system resources. Though this is not exactly straightforward, as audit, even though it is heavy, does provide quite a bit of information that if we want to replicate with eBPF, it means we would have to trace quite a lot more of things. Sorry, go ahead.
So it sounds a little bit, from how you just said that, what I hear in that is that BPF allows a lighter weight, narrower use case than Audit D does. To do everything Audit D does, it becomes as heavy as Audit D, but it allows you to do much narrower things inexpensively. And
I don't know if it would end up being as heavy as Audit. I just didn't try yet. So, I mean, I did try to do this when I have used the BCC library. And I also tried doing this with BPF trace. I made 2 different extensions to that would import those 2 projects as libraries, even though it is really hard to use them as integration inside the query because there are many instances where the library just terminates the process if something goes wrong. And we also need to tweak how memory allocations are performed. And also we need to be able to make sure we can limit them. And that is why I wrote a new library. I didn't try again or implementing the full audit-like tracing system.
I mean, I feel like there's sort of 3 possibilities, right? One of them is to create something like the ATC functionality, so you have runtime BPF, which is pretty cool. It seems like a neat feature. Another one would be to replace Audit D, which potentially needs to effectively be bug compatible at the table layer. And
well,
another
I wouldn't really replace it. I would create additional tables called like BPF process events.
Yeah, and the third way would be to create like an additional table that maybe is slightly less rich or something, but maybe better in other ways. And then, we could basically just be like, I don't know, test this. Do we like it more? If we like it more, we can replace the old one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the things we are using on BPF do require up-to-date kernels. And it makes sense to keep audit around indefinitely for as long as the systems we support do not have the full BPF feature set. And of course, we need to be to have feature parity. The thing about the ATC is that while it is interesting to trace system calls on their own, there will be no way with the kind of usage to implement some kind of logic to piece different events together. So, for example, if we want to replicate the socket events table in BPF, we would have to trace for example, the socket and the bind and listen system calls to track FD usage. And this is not something we would be able to express inside the configuration file. So
Why not?
ATC is something that would be interesting to implement regardless. But if we want to implement the specific tables, we would have to do it by code.
I mean, I guess I don't know enough. I'm under the impression that like inside BPF, you can create little programs that do stuff.
Yeah.
But why couldn't, I mean, I like imagining putting one of those into my osquery config. I don't know. Maybe it's impossible. I don't understand it. I should test things. I should play with this.
Yeah, well, the trouble with BPF is that it is highly limited in what you can do. For example, right now we cannot use loops in the version I mean, you can do them in 5.3 if the verifier can prove that the loop has an end. They're called bound loops. But in order to try and lower the required kernel version to 4.18, we are not using them. So you cannot have function calls. You cannot jump backwards. You cannot have data section, so you cannot have any kind of global variable or string literal. And I mean, there are many limitations. Even the stack size is limited to 0.5 kilobyte. There are many things that cannot be done there. So the program usually just takes the data you need. You can then do some light processing on it, but at the end, you will always store something in a map or to a perf output and then use it from user mode.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just taking some notes.
Yeah.
So when you say all of that, what it really sounds like is implementing new tables is probably the first thing, and we have to like do some more stuff there before we figure out if there's a place to replace AutoD tables or create something like ATC.
And this is why I was thinking about the current code we have for BPF, because it is only tracing two system calls that are extremely easy to replicate. So starting small, I would start with those.
I mean, that seems cool. I kind of wonder if we could basically make a runtime switch for, if you're on a system that is BPF, then you get the BPF implementation of process events or something.
Maybe, I don't know. It is still too early to
absolutely
attempt to replace those tables.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, where would you store those two system calls?
Like, where would I store what it hooks?
No, I mean the current facility that traces the set UID and kill using BPF.
I guess the question is like, so we have a current table that uses those. I don't know this code super well.
Yeah, I actually never tried it. It has been implemented using hard-coded opcodes written directly in C.
Does it? Do you need to get rid of it to start playing with your code?
I can.
Would it be easier? Would it be easier to get rid of it?
Well, not really. But I was wondering how people were using it so that I can create something similar. If there is a need to have something similar. Otherwise, just I'm okay with just having a name for a table where we can like store this kind of data. Like, I don't know, system call events.
To be fair, I would also ask, I think this is something we eventually have to ask to Teddy if he knows something, but if we can I mean, if they are using it at all, if we need it, if we can just take it out, because I think it's again something that's half implemented, and also we cannot reliably run tests on the CI. Well, that's partially the let's say test infrastructure, the general test infrastructure fault, because those tests particularly has to be run with root, otherwise you cannot test them properly or test them. Yep. So
yeah, we can
I mean,
have them side by side then.
Sorry. Yeah, side by side.
We can have them both side by side.
So for the little that it's worth, I am not aware of anyone using BPF.
Okay, so how about we make something like we have this system call events table,
So
and then
sorry,
with
I'm
a switch
skipping
we enable.
PRs quickly. So BPF was enabled 1 year ago, about a year ago by, I think this is I think Alexander, he's one of the Facebook UK folks.
Yeah.
So it hasn't really been around for very long, right? It was never released in a stable version prior to 4. Right, because I think this would have been after the experimental freeze. So if it's used anywhere, it's going to be inside Facebook. And to be honest, it's probably used inside Facebook because they wouldn't have gone through the effort of implementing it if they didn't want it.
Yeah.
So if I say that, then probably either the initial work you do should kind of be aside from that, or it should be very clearly compatible with that.
So what do you think about the system call events table?
What do we have today? Is there a system call events table? I feel I'm a little lost.
No, I mean, I don't know how this data is presented yet. I will check after the meeting. But I was proposing then to create a new table named system call events that gets populated with syscalls enabled from a command line switch from a CLI flag or
configuration
whatever configuration flag. Yeah.
I mean, that seems fine. Like, broadly speaking, that seems like a valuable tool, right? Of like, I don't know if anyone would enable it or use it, but it seems like a good way to kind of test the waters a little bit of being like, here, you can hook system calls. Do we like this? Do we not like this? And then, maybe other things are to think about. Is there a specific table that we could look at building? And like, what would that table look like?
Yeah.
Once upon a time, I wanted to build a BPF table that would like monitor all outbound DNS queries. Right, like that's kind of a common example BPF program.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, but like I don't like. Why start with that? That doesn't make sense.
There are many things we can do with that. So it is not yet implemented in the library, but with uprobes, you can hook any library C function system-wide. And I believe you can do many things with this, like get host address.
Yeah. So just skimming very quickly, I don't know that there are any tables that use this stuff, which kind of makes me wonder if like to the extent they're using it, it's in an extension somewhere.
Maybe I didn't do a good job at studying the BPF code in osquery.
I mean, I don't see any spec files in the PR, and I don't see any, like, if I look in the source code, I mostly see utility functions.
Yeah, no, it was still in an experimental stage, so they probably have internally something that's newer. The question is also, does it look the same as the one we have? So
they may not even have used it. They're like, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, my question earlier, it was just to, I'm not saying since this half done it is bad per se, I'm just asking, do we want to have something that we don't know if it's used and we have to possibly maintain it somehow?
I'm wholly in favor of only having one thing. I just think it has to be like we add this thing and then we remove that thing.
Yeah.
But I also like some of this is, yeah, I don't know. It feels like a little bit of a, if this is fundamentally, if the thing that we have today is primarily a utility for extensions to use, is that something similar? Like, could you? I don't even know. I don't even know. And I don't know. I don't know.
I think we can wait for. I mean, yeah, we can wait for Teddy whenever he has time, and we can ask him if he's against. I mean, if in general thinks that and knows that there's a use for that code.
Yeah, like it looks like there's just, yeah, I'm sort of skimming the code. Like it looks like it's got functions for like taking a BPF program. And there's this whole tracing. What is this tracing stuff? This calls tracing. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Having a syscall event stable seems cool. And replacing stuff seems cool. And having functionality seems cool. Okay, I don't have anything else. And I think everyone else left.
Yeah.
I have to leave now in a minute, so I can go to another meeting too.
Okay, well, nice to talk to you all.
Yeah, same. It was nice seeing you.
Feel free to skim over the office hours and make any corrections. I'll shove them all into Git in a little while.
All right. Will do.
Okay.
See ya.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.